The unexpected beginning. It was just another quiet afternoon at the cafe. The air was filled with the familiar blend of espresso and fresh pastries, lingering in the corners of the room like a soft, comforting memory. Dinah moved between tables with a slow, almost robotic pace, her exhaustion building with each passing minute. The hours felt longer than they should, every tick of the clock reminding her of the hours left until her shift would finally end. Today had been particularly difficult. The tips had been sparse, mostly just small change left behind by customers, too absorbed in their phones to even acknowledge her. She glanced at her phone again, the looming reminder of unpaid rent and bills making her stomach twist. Rent was due in 2 days and the phone bill was still untouched. Dinah exhaled, rubbing her temples. It felt like the weight of the world was constantly bearing down on her. Just one more hour, and she could escape, at least for the day, but the minutes dragged on endlessly. Her thoughts were interrupted by the chime of the door. A familiar sound, yet it seemed to pierce through the usual hum of the cafe. Dinah looked up, startled. A man walked in, tall, lean, dressed in a simple shirt and slacks, yet carrying an air of effortless sophistication. He was accompanied by 2 men who blended seamlessly into the background, but whose watchful eyes said it all. They were there for security. For a split second, Dinah froze. There was something about him, something that seemed oddly familiar. And then it hit her. Michael Jordan, the legendary basketball star, the man whose name was known across the globe, was standing right there in her cafe. Dinah's heart skipped a beat. She blinked, trying to process the moment. This was surreal. A man who had redefined sports and captured the admiration of millions was here in her little cafe, as if he were just another customer. She felt a rush of nerves, her mind momentarily blank, but professionalism kicked in. Dinah grabbed her order pad and made her way toward his table, her step steady despite the whirlwind in her chest. "Good afternoon, sir. Can I get you something to start with?" she asked, forcing a polite smile. Michael Jordan looked up, his gaze calm and composed. There was a quiet kindness in his expression, a sense of warmth that felt genuine. "Just a cappuccino and one of those croissants, please," he said softly. His voice was smooth, without the arrogance one might expect from a global icon. It was the voice of someone who understood the value of simplicity, someone who didn't need to flaunt his status. "Of course," Dinah replied, jotting down the order, her hand shaking slightly. She turned away, her mind racing. Why was she so nervous? He was just a customer, but somehow, in that moment, he felt more significant than any other person who had walked through that door. As she prepared his cappuccino, Dinah kept stealing glances at his table. There was something about him, the way he didn't bury himself in his phone like the other customers, the way he simply sat there, observing the world outside with a calm, thoughtful gaze. It was almost as if he wasn't just present in the cafe, he was fully present in the moment. This wasn't about making small talk or rushing through a meal. Michael Jordan seemed to be there to enjoy the quiet, to reflect, just like Dinah had been doing in her own way. She was suddenly aware of the contrast between the two of them. He, the icon, so used to the spotlight, and she, the waitress, who had long ago faded into the background of her own life. As she carried the cappuccino and croissant over to his table, Dinah could feel her heartbeat quicken, the nerves, the unease. It was all still there, but now it was mixed with something else, a deep sense of curiosity. What was it about this man, this moment, that was making her so anxious? She placed the tray down in front of him, careful to keep her hands steady. "Here you go," she said gently, her voice just above a whisper. Michael Jordan looked up, a faint smile touching his lips. "Thank you," he said, his voice warm and sincere. "You're welcome," Dinah replied, keeping her tone polite but soft. She turned to leave, but as she walked back to the counter, she couldn't shake the feeling that this moment, this small exchange, wasn't as ordinary as it seemed. The cafe was quiet again, save for the faint hum of background music, but in that silence, Dinah couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. She glanced back at his table, noticing how he sat there, sipping water from his glass, his posture relaxed but intentional. He wasn't in a hurry, he wasn't rushed, he was simply there. And for a brief moment, Dinah allowed herself to wonder, what was he thinking? A special connection? As Dinah busied herself with her usual tasks, Wiping down counters, refilling sugar containers, and trying to make herself appear occupied, her thoughts couldn't help but wander back to Michael Jordan. It wasn't just his famous face that lingered in her mind. It was the way he carried himself, the way he existed so fully in the present moment, as if nothing else mattered but the quiet afternoon in the cafe. She had seen countless celebrities come and go. They often appeared behind dark sunglasses or hid behind a veil of bodyguards, leaving only the faintest trace of their presence. They were never truly present, always distracted, always consumed by their own world. But not Michael. He was different. There was a stillness about him, an authenticity that stood out in a room filled with noise, distractions, and the frantic energy of a fast-paced world. For a brief second, Dinah found herself lost in thought, trying to understand what it was that made this interaction feel so unique. Why was she so captivated by his calm demeanor, by the simple way he enjoyed his cappuccino? She realized, with a quiet jolt, that it wasn't about his fame or the fact that he was Michael Jordan. It was the way he seemed to notice everything around him, and yet remained perfectly unbothered by it all. He wasn't in a rush, he wasn't seeking attention, he wasn't distracted by the flashing of his phone or the noise of the world outside. He was simply there, grounded in the moment. She had spent so many of her own days wishing for that kind of peace, that sense of being fully in the present. Life often felt like a blur for Dinah, moving from one task to the next, one problem to the next, never really stopping to breathe. She wasn't sure when it had happened, but somewhere along the way she had lost the ability to truly experience life as it came. Everything had become about surviving the day, getting through the shift, checking off another thing on her never-ending to-do list. Watching Michael, however, made her realize how much she had been missing. She wasn't sure why, but in that moment she saw something in him that felt familiar, something that echoed her own quiet struggle. Perhaps it was the fact that despite his immense fame and success, he was still just a man, someone who needed peace too, someone who understood the value of slowing down, of taking a moment to just be. As Dinah prepared his cappuccino and croissant, she couldn't shake the sense that maybe for the first time in a long while, she was witnessing something far beyond the surface. Michael Jordan wasn't just a basketball legend. He was a person who understood the importance of compassion, of slowing down to appreciate the small things in life. The way he sat quietly, contemplating, sipping his water, it reminded her that there was more to life than the endless rush she had become so accustomed to. And just like that, a small, quiet realization washed over her. Maybe, just maybe, she needed to learn how to exist in the moment too, to stop racing against time and let life unfold as it would. Maybe if she allowed herself to pause, she would find peace in the chaos of her own life. Maybe it wasn't about waiting for everything to fall into place, but about allowing herself the space to breathe, to be present, just like Michael Jordan had been. The thought stayed with Dinah as she carried the cappuccino and croissant over to his table. She placed the tray down carefully, her hands no longer shaking. As she looked up, she met Michael's eyes again, and for a moment everything seemed to pause. His gaze wasn't just polite, it was warm, genuine, and full of a quiet understanding. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice a reminder that, in the midst of her own struggles, there was still kindness in the world. She smiled, her heart feeling a little lighter than it had before. She didn't know what it was about this interaction that made her feel so different, but she felt it. Deep in her chest, Michael Jordan had, unknowingly, given her a small gift that day. The gift of presence, of realizing that sometimes the simplest moments could be the most profound. As she turned to walk back to the counter, she allowed herself to breathe a little deeper, to remember that in this fast-paced world, there was still room to pause, to appreciate the quiet moments, and to truly live. The note and the tip. The afternoon passed in a haze of routine, with Dinah keeping herself busy, but her mind still lingering on the small encounter with Michael Jordan. She continued to clear tables, refill sugar containers, and wipe down counters, but something had shifted in her. The weight of the moment, the warmth of his smile, the quiet kindness in his voice, it had all settled deep within her chest, like a small ember that refused to fade. It wasn't until much later, as she approached Michael's table to clear the remnants of his meal, that she saw it. At first, she thought she had missed something, that she had just forgotten to take his receipt when she dropped off his coffee. But as she reached for the empty cappuccino cup, she saw a small, folded piece of paper tucked under the rim. Her heart skipped a beat. She paused for a moment, the tip of her fingers hovering just above the receipt. A sudden rush of anxiety flooded her. What if it was just a regular tip? Maybe he had simply left a few extra dollars, the way some customers did when they felt particularly generous. Maybe it was nothing special. But then, as she picked it up and unfolded it, her breath caught in her throat. The number on the receipt was astounding, a tip so large it made her stomach drop. The numbers on the paper seemed to blur for a moment as she tried to process what she was seeing. 4 digits. Not just a generous tip, it was life-changing. It was beyond anything she had ever received in all her years of waiting tables. But as her hands trembled, unfolding the receipt further, what truly took her breath away wasn't the money. It was the note, written just above the total. Your kindness and hard work don't go unnoticed. My family has been where you are. Stay strong, brighter days are coming. The words hit Dinah like a wave. She blinked, struggling to process the meaning behind them. She had always worked hard, always tried to give her best to every customer, even when it felt like no one noticed, like no one cared. But here, written in Michael Jordan's handwriting, was a message that made her feel seen, understood, and acknowledged in a way she hadn't experienced in years. The note wasn't just about the money. It was about the words. Those words. My family has been where you are. They were simple, yet they carried so much weight. It was as if Michael Jordan had seen the struggles she carried silently, the unspoken hardships that weighed her down day after day. He had seen her in a way no one else had. And for the first time in months, Dinah felt like she wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't just a waitress, another person behind the counter, going unnoticed. She was human. She mattered. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she stumbled back into the chair across from where he had sat. She couldn't believe it. Why would he take the time to write something so thoughtful? Why would he notice her? She was just a waitress, doing her job, no different from the hundreds of other people she had worked alongside in her life, and yet Michael Jordan, a man whose name was synonymous with greatness, had chosen to leave her not just money, but words that would stay with her forever. Her hands shook as she held the receipt, reading the note again and again, letting the words sink into her soul. Stay strong, brighter days are coming. She whispered them to herself under her breath. She didn't know what it was, but something about those words made her feel like everything might finally be okay. Like maybe, just maybe, things weren't as hopeless as they seemed. Maybe there was a light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe there was hope. It wasn't just the tip that had made Dinah's heart swell. It was the realization that, in a world that often felt cold and indifferent, kindness still existed. Real, raw kindness. The kind that didn't ask for anything in return. Michael Jordan hadn't just given her money, he had given her the belief that she mattered, that her efforts didn't go unnoticed, and that her struggles weren't invisible. As the tears streamed down her face, Dinah didn't care who might see her. She didn't care if anyone judged her for being emotional. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen, and it was a feeling she hadn't realized she had been craving for so long. The note was more than just a gesture. It was a lifeline, a beacon of light in a world that often felt overwhelmingly dark. And in that moment, Dinah realized something powerful. She wasn't alone. She was seen, and maybe, just maybe, brighter days were on the horizon after all. The story spreads, and the attention grows. The days that followed were a blur for Dinah. The weight of Michael Jordan's kind words and the unexpected generosity left her feeling more alive, more hopeful than she had in a long time. She kept the receipt and the note close, tucking them carefully into her apron pocket, as if afraid to let go of the warmth they gave her. It wasn't just about the money. It was about what those words meant. It was about feeling noticed for the first time in what felt like years, and for a brief moment, Dinah allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything could get better. But what Dinah didn't realize, as she moved through the rest of her shift in a daze, was that the story of her encounter with Michael Jordan had already begun to spread. What had seemed like a simple act of kindness, one that had brought her so much personal comfort, was becoming something much larger. People noticed. The customers in the cafe whispered. Her co-workers glanced over with a mix of curiosity and awe. The note had struck a chord with more than just Dinah. It was sparking something in everyone around her. By the time Dinah got home that night, the floodgates had opened. Her phone, which had sat silent for most of the day, was now blowing up with messages from friends and family. She scrolled through text after text, all of them asking the same thing. Is this you? Her heart skipped a beat. At first she thought it was just a fluke, maybe a local story that someone had picked up. But then she opened one of the links, and it hit her. The story was everywhere. The headline was simple but powerful. Michael Jordan leaves waitress a heartfelt note and huge tip. The internet reacts. Below the title, the photo of the receipt and note she had tucked away in her pocket was clearly visible. The article told her story, the story of a struggling waitress, an unexpected celebrity, and a simple note that changed everything. Her personal moment of kindness was now public, and there was no turning back. Dinah felt her stomach twist in a way it never had before. Suddenly, her personal, private interaction with Michael Jordan wasn't just her own. It belonged to the world now. The internet had taken hold of it, and within hours the story had gone viral. Hundreds of thousands of people shared it on social media, commenting on the generosity of Michael Jordan, praising him for his kindness. And yet, among those comments, Dinah couldn't help but notice that the conversation was beginning to shift. It wasn't just about Michael anymore. People were starting to talk about her, about the waitress who had been chosen for this rare moment of kindness. It felt like the entire world was suddenly watching her. Her phone kept buzzing, notifications flooding in. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, every social media platform seemed to be filled with people discussing her story. Strangers from all over the country were talking about her, speculating about her life, her struggles, and how the gesture had affected her. It was overwhelming. Dinah felt like she was drowning in attention she hadn't asked for, didn't want, and certainly wasn't prepared for. She had never imagined her quiet life would be turned upside down in such a public way. The next day at work, it became even more real. When Dinah walked into the cafe, she felt the eyes of everyone on her. The regulars looked at her with a newfound respect, even reverence. The staff exchanged glances, some with excitement, others with disbelief. Dinah couldn't escape the feeling that every word she said, every move she made was being watched. It wasn't just another shift anymore. She was the waitress, the one whose story had gone viral, the one who had been touched by the kind of generosity that most people only dreamed of. Even her manager, who usually had a stern look on her face, greeted her with a broad smile and a sense of pride. "You're a local hero now," she said, her voice laced with a teasing tone, but there was something else behind her words. A sense of awe that Dinah couldn't shake. She wasn't sure if she was ready to embrace this new version of herself. Dinah had always worked behind the scenes, out of the spotlight, content to serve others without the need for recognition. Now, her story was being told everywhere, and the pressure was mounting. She felt exposed, vulnerable, and unsure of how to handle the attention that came with it. But as the shift went on, the reality began to sink in. There was something deeper happening here. Something that went beyond the viral nature of the story. People were connecting with her. They were seeing the humanity in her, the struggles she had faced, the long hours, the exhaustion. And somehow, through all the noise and chaos, Michael Jordan's gesture had reminded everyone that kindness still existed, that there was still good in the world. It wasn't just about the fame or the tip, it was about the message. It was about reminding people that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could change everything. By the end of the day, Dinah realized that the story wasn't just hers anymore. It had become a story for everyone, a story of how a simple act of compassion had the power to ripple out into the world and make a difference. She wasn't alone in her struggle. She had touched people's hearts, and in turn, they had shared her story, letting it grow and blossom into something larger than life. Dinah didn't know where this journey would take her. She didn't know if she wanted to be famous or if the attention would eventually fade. But she knew one thing for certain. Michael Jordan had not only changed her day, but had also reminded her that kindness, no matter how small, could make an impact far beyond what anyone could imagine. And for the first time in a long time, Dinah allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, brighter days were coming. The realization: kindness is bigger than her. The story of Dinah and Michael Jordan, a quiet waitress and an internationally known icon, had taken a life of its own. The news spread like wildfire, its ripple effect reaching places she never imagined. What had started as a small, intimate gesture of kindness, a tip left with a heartfelt note, was now an entire movement in the eyes of thousands. As the days passed, Dinah found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions: disbelief, gratitude, and, above all, an overwhelming sense of being seen in a way she never had been before. For so long, Dinah had worked in the shadows of life, hidden in the routines of serving, cleaning, and making small talk with customers who rarely noticed her beyond her role as a waitress. She had learned to bury her exhaustion, her frustration, and the weight of her struggles, putting on a smile that she had worn so many times it had become second nature. She had carried these burdens silently, just another person going through life, doing her job but never truly feeling seen. Life was a constant grind: pay the bills, make ends meet, and somehow hold on long enough to survive the next day. But then Michael Jordan had entered her life in the most unexpected way. A quiet customer, one who hadn't come for attention, hadn't demanded anything special, but who had left her not just a tip, but words. Words that unlocked a sense of recognition she had never felt before. It was as if, in that brief encounter, Michael had seen beyond the surface, beyond the tired smile, beyond the fatigue of a waitress trying to make it through another shift. He had seen her humanity, he had recognized her struggle, and in doing so he had given her something more than money. He had given her the gift of being noticed, of being understood. At first, Dinah tried to keep the note and the tip to herself. It felt too personal, too sacred to share with the world. The words, the meaning behind them, felt like a secret she needed to keep close to her heart. But as the story went viral, she couldn't help but realize that this moment wasn't just for her. It was for everyone. The more she read the messages flooding her phone, the more she understood that the note had become something bigger than just a random act of kindness. It wasn't about Michael Jordan's fame or wealth. It was about the message he had shared with her. A message that spoke to anyone who had ever felt invisible, anyone who had ever struggled in silence. The message was simple, but it was powerful. You are seen. You matter. Your hard work doesn't go unnoticed. There is hope, and brighter days are ahead. As Dinah walked through the cafe each day, feeling the weight of the attention on her, she started to see the shift. Customers who had once ignored her now looked at her differently, with a sense of admiration. Her co-workers treated her with newfound respect. But it wasn't the admiration or the attention that mattered most. What truly struck her was how this moment, this act of kindness, had sparked a larger conversation about the goodness of people, the power of empathy, and the importance of small acts of kindness. The note had touched the hearts of people all around the world, people who had never met her, who didn't know her story, but who could relate to the universal truth that kindness still has the power to heal, to lift others, and to bring hope. This realization settled in Dinah's chest like a quiet epiphany. The true beauty of what had happened wasn't the attention or the recognition she was receiving. It was the idea that kindness, in its simplest form, could have such a profound impact. Michael Jordan's note had reminded people of the importance of looking beyond the surface and acknowledging the struggles of others. It had reminded Dinah that she wasn't alone in her challenges, and that the world, despite its many flaws, was still full of compassion. Through all the attention, Dinah started to understand something deeper. This was bigger than her. The kindness that had been shared wasn't just about a famous person helping a waitress. It was about showing the world that everyone deserves to be seen, every struggle deserves to be acknowledged, and every person, no matter their position in life, has value. As she reflected on the events of the past few days, Dinah couldn't help but smile. Yes, her life had changed in ways she never expected. Yes, her name was being spoken in places she'd never been. But the most significant change wasn't external. It was internal. The simple act of kindness from a stranger had reminded her that no matter how difficult life gets, there is always room for hope. There is always room for light, even in the darkest of times, and that was a gift she would carry with her forever. Her story, now shared across the world, had become a beacon of hope not just for her but for countless others who were struggling, unnoticed, just like she had been. And in that moment, Dinah realized that sometimes it's the smallest gestures that have the largest impact. The decision, embracing the ripple of kindness. As the days went by, Dinah found herself standing at a crossroads, caught between the comfort of anonymity and the weight of newfound attention. The world had been watching her, sharing her story, and responding to it in ways she never expected. Strangers from all corners of the country sent messages of encouragement and admiration. Her name had become a symbol of something greater than her, a symbol of hope, kindness, and the quiet power of a simple gesture. But despite the surge of support, Dinah couldn't shake the feeling of being exposed. She wasn't sure if she was ready for this level of attention. She had never sought the spotlight, and the idea of having her private life dissected by millions of strangers made her feel vulnerable in ways she hadn't anticipated. There were moments when she wished everything could go back to the way it was before, when her life was quiet, when she could walk through the cafe unnoticed, when she could go about her day without the weight of the world watching her every move. But deep down, Dinah knew that things had changed. The attention wasn't going away. The world had already embraced her story, and there was no turning back. The question now was what to do with it. She thought about Michael Jordan and the note he had left her. She thought about how his simple words had made her feel seen, valued, and understood. And then she thought about the countless others who had reached out, sharing their own stories of struggle and resilience. People were talking, and her story was resonating with them. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about something much larger, something that transcended her personal experience. It was about the power of kindness, about the importance of recognizing the struggles of others, and about the hope that even in our darkest moments, there is light. As Dinah sat in her apartment that evening, reading through yet another message from a stranger, she realized something profound. Her story was no longer just her own. It belonged to everyone who had ever felt invisible, to everyone who had ever struggled in silence, to everyone who had longed for someone to notice their pain. It was a reminder that kindness is not just an act. It is a lifeline that connects us all, even in our most difficult time. The weight of this realization settled deep within Dinah. She didn't have to hide from the attention. She didn't have to shy away from the spotlight. What mattered now was how she chose to use it. She had the power to turn this moment of vulnerability into something powerful. She had the power to share her story with the world, to use it as a platform for something greater than herself. With newfound clarity, Dinah made her decision. She would no longer shy away from the attention, but embrace it. She would use her platform to talk about the importance of kindness, to share the stories of others who, like her, had felt unseen. She would remind people that we are all connected, that we all have the power to make a difference in someone's life, no matter how small the gesture may seem. In the days that followed, Dinah started sharing her own story publicly. She spoke about the struggles she had faced, the moments of doubt, and the power of Michael's note to change everything for her. She shared her hope that, through her experience, others might find the courage to reach out and show kindness to those around them. Her words resonated deeply with people, and they began to share their own stories in return. What started as a single act of kindness had grown into a movement that reminded people that, in the end, we are all connected by the simple, yet powerful, act of being kind. As Dinah continued to speak out, she realized that she was no longer just a waitress serving customers in a cafe. She had become a voice for those who felt unseen, for those who needed hope, and for those who believed that, in this world, kindness still had the power to change lives. The ripple effect of Michael Jordan's gesture had reached far beyond what any of them could have imagined, and in that moment, Dinah knew that she had made the right choice. She had embraced the ripple of kindness, and it was bigger than anything she could have ever dreamed. Through it all, Dinah had learned that sometimes we need to step out of our comfort zones, embrace the unexpected, and allow ourselves to be vulnerable. Because in that vulnerability, in that openness, there is power, there is healing, and there is the opportunity to make a difference. Not just for ourselves, but for the world around us. If Dinah's story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Take a moment to think about the small acts of kindness you can show today. Whether it's a smile, a word of encouragement, or just being present for someone who needs it, you have the power to make a difference. Hit that subscribe button for more stories that inspire and uplift, and join a community that believes in the power of kindness. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a moment where kindness changed everything for you? Let's talk about it, and remember, the world needs more kindness, and it starts with you.